Good morning, everybody. There's quite a few people on the line, which is great, and following yesterday's excellent first webinar. Today's all about the financial and commercial sides of what we're going through at the moment. Some organisations' finances will be probably relatively stable in the very short term, but there is a big medium and long-term question mark for most organisations. We know this week there have been representations to government from the charities sector, which is facing, in the words of one prominent charity leader, an existential crisis at the moment. So whether it's now or whether it's in the near future, charities, particularly small charities, are very vulnerable, very fragile. Social businesses, it's a slightly different kind of challenge because we're all about trading, we're all about near and short-term revenues and the certainty and uncertainties that accrue to those. I felt it was really useful to have a conversation about money fairly early because this is what we're probably all starting to think of this week, and we're starting to plan and trying to make our resources fit what we think is going to be available. To that end, and I'll stop in a second, I've invited Iain Hasdell to join us. I'll introduce Iain very quickly. Iain is a former KPMG partner and is an advisor to a number of social businesses, some of whom you'll know. Iain's also spoke at Social Club earlier this year, late last year, early this year, around governance as well, on which he's an expert. But it's in terms of his commercial experience that I asked him to join the call today. So Iain's just going to talk for a bit, and then a bit like yesterday, I'm going to try and facilitate a conversation. If you wish to speak, there's a little button you can press to raise your hand, and then that'll be brought to my attention, and then we'll get you involved in the conversation. So let's crack on, and I'll hand over to Iain. Thank you, Iain, and good morning.
Well, Iain, I just need to unmute you. There we go.
He's still muted.
No, you should be able to speak now, Iain.
Very good. Good morning, Craig. Good morning, Joe. Good morning, everybody. Craig has asked me to, and it's nice to be doing something non-contagious this morning. So whatever you think of anything that I say, I can guarantee that it's not contagious. Craig has asked me to kick off by doing a few minutes of a burst of thoughts about commercial and financial things that you could sensibly be thinking about, and hopefully that will kickstart a wider conversation. So let me start with a few thoughts. I'm going to start with a really obvious one. Most businesses in the UK, whether they're in the social business sector or any other sector, fail because they singularly fail to understand their cash position. And as simple and straightforward as that sounds, it's still true. And in the last financial crisis, it was very, very true. Lots of businesses failed because they just didn't know how they were doing for cash. So first message from me is make sure that somebody in the organization really understands what the day-to-day, hour-by-hour cash position is. And along with that, I wanted to say, before moving on, don't be afraid to chase debtors. A lot of the people, if you have debtors, a lot of the people who you have debtors with may not be there in 22 weeks' time. Don't be embarrassed to chase debtors. A second point I wanted to make was grab the help that's available. And here I specifically mean that a lot of you will be implicated with exchequer funding. So you'll be in receipt of elements or a lot of public sector funding. The public sector is under a massive edict now from number 10 to help. So if you feel you need to renegotiate your payment terms for when you're paid, the terms that you're paid by public sector funders, I hesitate to use the word commissioners because ultimately they're funders, then do it and do it really quickly. So grab the help. The flip side of that is also be helpful. Now this applies to only some people, but some people who run social businesses that are largely dependent on public funding actually have quite large reserves. One of the features of the sector is the reserve-rich nature of the sector. If you are in that position, many won't be, but if you are in that position, use your reserves to help. You know, if you've got people in your supply chain or key partners who are struggling in the short term for cash, or they're struggling with anything where small amounts of money, including loans, would help, then use your balance sheet to help. Why wouldn't you do that? Next point I wanted to make quickly was about being litigious. So a lot of you will be into contract variations. Indeed, some of you may be very quickly having to deal up new contracts. One of the lessons of previous crises is that social businesses tend to be incredibly kind. They tend to be very pragmatic. They jump to it, they help, and then they find afterwards that none of it was ever written down. And they find themselves shortchanged, both for cash and for risk. My strong plea in terms of commercial and financial advice is if you're doing anything major that is new and is contractual, don't do it unless it's written down. Make sure it's written down, make sure it's contractually agreed. The next quick point I wanted to make was be commercial on insurance. We heard a little bit about this on yesterday's webinar from Lance Gardner and others. But if you are allowing other people to use your buildings in this crisis, or your people are using other people's buildings, then the insurance implications of that can actually be profound and are often profound. Don't turn a blind eye to any of that. The insurance companies, they're on lockdown in terms of minimizing their payments out. So government is on an edict to get as much government cash out the door as it can. The insurance business is on an edict to make sure as little cash as possible goes out the door. So don't get caught out on insurances. Make sure somebody owns the fine detail of all of your insurance risks. I would encourage you to negotiate. It's a great time at the moment to renegotiate leases, not just for buildings, but for equipment, for things like cars, for supplies that you know you will need when hopefully things get back to something slightly closer to normality. When that is, who knows. But it is a great time to renegotiate. A lot of people are very keen, landlords and suppliers, to renegotiate terms if it means they keep you as a customer. If you've got the headspace and the capacity to put people on in procurement terms to renegotiate things, do it. Do it. The advantages of it could be huge. And then I have three other quick points to make before I hand back to Craig and to Joe. One is use your board. So at the moment, you've got non-exec directors and trustees kicking around, probably not coming into your buildings anymore, probably not engaged quite as they were before. Use them. And one of the powerful things that you can do with trustees and NEDs is they can tap into the spare capacity that is raging in the private sector at the moment. You've got a lot of brilliant people in the commercial sector sat at home. A lot of them still have jobs, but they don't have a lot to do, and they want to help. And your NEDs and your trustees can be an excellent gateway into tapping into that resource. And people from the commercial world, the raw commercial world, have a lot to offer at the moment in terms of help if you take advantage of it. So use your board, and I would say use your board more than you've ever done before, even though you might think the opposite is a good idea. Two other quick things. One is be strategic. So again, if you have the capacity to do this, to keep an account of what is going on in your business and how you're coping, and take careful note of what you are managing to do without. And this particularly applies strategically to the back and middle office. A lot of you will be losing back and middle office capacity as you go through this crisis, and a lot of you will be managing without it. It's a fantastic commercial and financial idea to keep a log of all of that, so that when we come out the other side, you can see strategically in your business what you missed and what you didn't miss. And you'll be very surprised if you do that, because you will find that you got by absolutely fine with without quite a bit of the back and middle office that you used to think was absolutely critical. And that will tell you a lot about the overheads that you're carrying as a business. So I throw that in as encouragement. It's not a nice to have. I would say that's a business essential. Get someone to log that story as you go through the crisis. And then a final thought for you, just to finish this initial burst to get the conversation going. Excuse me 2 seconds. Hardly anybody does this. I implore you to do it. If you've got investments, get them checked out. Get somebody onto your investments now. This includes pensions, but any investments that you've got that are managed by a third party, get that conversation going right now. Do not assume that fund managers know what they're doing, and do not assume that you are a priority for them in looking after your money. Get on the front foot, talk to them, ask them what they're doing, ask them what they're doing to mitigate the risks with your money, and satisfy yourself that you're happy with what they're doing. Absolutely critical. Hardly anyone does it. The people who don't do it often end up financially bereaved in a big, big way, and then of course wish they had done it. So I recognize there's lots of different people on this call from lots of different businesses. I just wanted to throw in a few initial thoughts in that way to try and get the chat going. I hope it's helpful, and I'll now, with pleasure, hand back to Craig and to Joe.
Thank you, Ian, and I think that was a perfect way of getting the conversation going. I'm going to use Chair's privilege to ask a couple of things myself, and then I'm sure there'll be other questions as we go along. There's quite a lot of talk at the moment, Ian, of government help for employers and to support employment and so on and so forth. First question is, do you have a particular take on that, and what are your thoughts about how that might actually work? I think the second one, and I don't like two-parters, so forgive me if it's too much. But the second one is that I think a lot of us can see, if this is a 3-month thing, it's relatively easy to plan for and work through it. If it's a 6-month thing, it's altogether different. It's existentially challenging for most organisations. Do you have any sort of reflections on how we go about those thought processes we've got to go through in different scenarios? Because at the moment we just don't know whether this is a 3-month, 6-month or 9-month thing. So 2 quite different questions, not easy ones to get us going, and then I'm sure there's hands around the room as well.
Okay, would you like me to respond to those now before we go wider?
Why not? Yeah, just let's do those, and then I think we'll gather up some questions from there, because that's probably enough to be going on with.
Okay, so on the first part of your question and government help, I'm much more focused on grabbing the help that I talked about a moment ago, Craig, which is the open door that there is from anyone who's publicly funded to help clients who are in receipt of public money to renegotiate their payment terms. You know, they will be extraordinarily helpful if you ask. I think people should focus more on that element of government help than the other elements, which are fundamentally about loans. And if your business is already starting to creak and struggle, it's quite unlikely that you're willing or you have a big appetite to take on additional debt. And at the moment, government is simply offering debt. At the moment, it's not offering anything else.
Is there talk of employment support?
Could what, sorry?
Talk of employment support and negative and tax credits and all sorts of stuff. Is that, do you think that's coming, or what's your, there's word about all these things swirling around in the newspaper?
Yeah, I think, sorry, Craig, I think that there will be more help to individuals. definitely there will be more help to individuals through the tax and benefit system, absolutely. I think your question was more focused on help for companies, and at the moment it is limited to loans. I don't see how that's hugely attractive to anyone, and even big businesses are spurning that and saying, well, actually it doesn't help. Interest rates are astonishingly low. I can go and borrow money anyway. You know, where's the ad? So I think at the moment it's better to focus on where the public sector can be flexible if you're in receipt of public funding. Excuse me, the point about 3 months or 6 months, I think all I can say is there's a ruthless determination in government and in industry to make sure this doesn't last more than 3 or 4 months. I don't think the public will accept it lasting more than 3 or 4 months. So at the moment, it's a reasonable thing to do to plan for, you know, a 20 to 22 week period of time where things are astonishingly difficult, and then assume that normality will slowly return. If you bet too negative on that and plan too negatively, you might just not be in the right position when it does come back to normal. So at the moment, and that's industry-wide, most people in commerce and industry are saying that plan for about 20 weeks.
Thank you, Ian. I'm gonna go around the room and just see if there's if anyone would like to ask or say anything. We've all got particular challenges. I've had conversations with many of you this week, and I know there are some organisations taking immediate steps because they have to. Others are contemplating what steps to take next. Would anybody like to either share or ask Ian anything, any questions on their mind this morning? Brendan's got his hand up. Brendan Martin from Public World, Buurtzorg, UK and Ireland.
Brendan, that's it. You're muted.
Oh, firstly, thank you very much, Craig, for organising this, and thank you, Ian, for your contributions so far. I've got the situation for us. We're a social enterprise, but not a charity, and we have basically 5 people, 2 on the payroll, and 3 who are contracted with us on a regular basis, from anything from 15 hours a week to more than that. And one could say that this has exposed the weakness in these employment arrangements, but they're genuine contractors rather than fake self-employment. We're expecting today that the Chancellor will announce some provisions for continued employment and income to regular employees. Obviously, that won't apply from my business to our contractors, but since those contractors are employed by me through their businesses, presumably, depending on the way in which the individuals pay themselves through their own businesses, is the extent to which whatever the Chancellor announces might benefit us as a group. And I wondered if there was anything we would be wise to know or to look at to assess the extent to which what's expected to be announced might apply in these varied circumstances.
Thank you, Brendan. Ian, any thoughts on that one?
Thank you, Brendan, for what's a very pertinent question that applies to lots of people, and your example is quite indicative. The people who've got the closest handle on this at the moment is the Confederation of Small Businesses. So they're lobbying hard to make sure that people who are in the more casual part of the economy, as people refer to it as, I don't quite know where that word casual has come from, but it's used widely, to make sure that people do get covered by these provisions where it's reasonable for them to be covered. At the moment, and I did check this morning, it's still fuzzy. You know, it's not clear what the eligibility will be. It's worth bearing in mind that the people who are framing this have an absolute obsession with getting rid of disguised remuneration. You know, that's where their heads are. So I wouldn't necessarily think they're going to be wonderfully sympathetic. So it depends how open they are to being lobbied. A good idea would be to be part of that lobbying, you know, so to put your point of view to whoever the best contact is at the Confederation of Small Businesses. But at the moment it's fuzzy, no clarity, Brendan.
Okay, thanks, Ian. Just looking around the room, I know one or two of you are have been in touch with me just about the cash emergency that you might be facing, or either now or sometime down the line, and that there are also some small charities on the call as well who very much depend on you know, either individual donations or trust and foundation income that flows in fairly regularly. Are any of you, what are you thinking at the moment? What are the kind of what are the things on your mind? Just quite interesting to, and even if it's just your own reflections, your own thoughts, I think it's just beneficial to others to hear them, and anything you've got to share, and Ian can reflect on that as well. And anyone out there would like to say something?
Hi, morning, everyone.
Just say who you are, Sat, because we can't see you; we can only hear you.
Yeah, sorry. I'll put it on. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Sat. Say who you are and your organisation as well. That'd be great.
So, first of all, I want to say a big thanks to Craig and Joe for kind of putting this together. Really, I think it's a big life-changing moment for everyone, isn't it? You know, I think we're all going through it together. So my name's Sat. I'm the CEO of a youth charity called Renaissance Foundation. We're very much a small grassroots charity, and in particular, we specialise in supporting young carers and young hospital patients. I think the biggest thing is that literally 90% of our young people are either going to have to self-isolate because they have heart transplant, cystic fibrosis, sickle cell, thalassemia, so the conditions that make them at the most high-risk groups themselves. Or the other half of our young people are young carers for parents or siblings that are at risk. So basically all of our young people need to self-isolate. We've shifted everything online, and we're doing our drop-ins, and the young people are in touch with us. And so operationally, the need is more than ever, actually, and the demand has been more than ever. A lot of them are really struggling with it mental health-wise as well. I think a lot of us adults are, never mind the young people with these conditions. Overnight, you know, so our concern is we rely exactly what Craig was saying on trusts and foundations, income, major donors and grants, and yeah, so we're still navigating that. We're not sure what to do really at the moment. We've got about 6 months running costs and that, so we just need to work out how best to steady the ship. And someone suggested, you know, do you just give your notice in your office, wait for the storm to clear and go a bit more virtual, use one of them kind of WeWork spaces when the things settle, and then do that. So but yeah, so yeah, more questions than answers at the moment, but yeah, we're sort of how do we navigate the next 6 months? I think that's the critical thing, isn't it? Do we cut now? Do we wait? Do we Yeah, I think we're all waiting for that speech today. Yeah.
Thanks, Sat. And those reflections are really. I think you've the points you've just made there. I think are thoughts that a lot of people are having right now. Ian, obviously, I think Sat just missed the first few moments of your talk, but it might be worth just reiterating some of the advice, you know, that you made. I noted that Sat's got 6 months reserves, which I think is probably quite a healthy position, but obviously there's a big question mark after that because we don't know what the behaviour of donors is going to be, and we know trust and foundation income is going to be very depressed next year because of the of what's happening in the equities in the investment and equities market this year. So yeah, what are your thoughts to a guy running a £500,000 turnover charity at this time? Well, between £250,000 and £500,000 turnover charity. What's your thoughts on that? Because there are a lot of them in the club and beyond.
Yeah, that's an easy question, isn't it? I mean, first of all, thank you for sharing those observations about, you know, where you really are right now, because hearing that makes it raw and makes it real for everybody. I don't want to repeat, Craig, some of the things that I said earlier, but a couple of embellishments occur. In the same way as I was encouraging people who may be in a slightly healthier financial position to reach out and help people in their supply chain, the same thing applies to people who are in a supply chain, in the way that we've just heard, who may have partners who they know could help them. And so some of this reaching out needs to be two-way. Now, obviously, I don't know people's individual circumstances, but if you're a key part of someone else's supply chain, don't be embarrassed about asking, can they help you survive this very difficult period, with cash, with help in kind, with advice, or potentially unlocking access to things they're taking advantage of. And I think the other thing, and I don't know if other people have seen this already, is don't stop asking for money. In fact, this is, I mean, I don't want this to sound mercenary and heartless. I'm just saying this from a commercial and financial position, but now is actually a very good time to ask people for money. And that might sound extraordinary to some people on this call, but one of the lessons of previous crises, whether it's a health crisis or a financial crisis, is that people with money will dig deep if they're asked the right question. So now isn't a time to stop asking for donations, contributions, and so on. It's a time to keep asking.
Really helpful. That is really helpful.
Judith Brody's just texted in with something. We had some problem hearing Judith yesterday, but I don't know if Judith. I know Judith's on the call. Can we hear you this today, Judith? Because you're texting through some good stuff.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hey.
Yes, we can.
Yeah,
so
I
Judith,
just
introduce yourself and then perhaps make the points, because they were very valuable points on the text.
okay. So I'm Judith Brody. I do interim work, and actually next week now I'm joining Vision Foundation as interim CEO while their CEO goes on maternity leave. So interesting time for them and me, actually, stepping in at this particular situation, because I'm going to start my job on Monday, but obviously I'm not going to go anywhere. So that's going to be interesting. But anyway, so I just wanted to flag in response to what Sat was saying, that charitable funders have already made some commitments. So London funders have made a couple of statements about emergency funding, but also about how about reporting requirements and being a lot less stringent about that. Being mindful of what charities and grantees are coping with. And the Association of Charitable Foundations has also got a sort of list of how different funders are responding. So I think funders, certainly in terms of trusts and foundations, are very, very mindful of how their grantees are having to respond and doing what they can.
Thank you.
That's super helpful, Judith. So yeah, to be clear, quite a lot of funders are being flexible. I was talking to a chief exec yesterday with a big lottery relationship. The lottery are apparently, the chief exec, Dawn Ostwick, put out a blog this week, basically with a message along the lines of, if you need to talk to us about flexing our payments and the terms, then have that conversation. And I know from a conversation I had yesterday with the chief exec of a very large organisation that they'd had a very successful conversation this week with the lottery around this. So that is playing out, and I think it's playing out among a number of trusts and foundations. So I think the lesson is pick up the phone, talk to them now. It's a good time to make that ask. Now, we've had a couple of question requests. We've had Kirsty Mooney.
Sorry, can I just quickly mention, Craig, I've put the links to those bodies, those umbrella bodies, on the group chat, on the Zoom group chat.
Fantastic. Oh, thank you, Judith. So yeah, so if you want to get those bodies, then you just go to the group chat and take it off there. Thank you, Judith. That's brilliant. We've got a couple of questions now coming. So we've got in this order. We've got Kirsty Mooney, and we've got Jen as well, whose second name I didn't see. Coming in.
We also have Rebecca. Rebecca was slightly ahead of everyone else there, but that's fine if we go in that order. Go
okay,
with
we've got plenty of time. Let's go in that order. So we'll go Kirsty, Jen, Rebecca. So we'll take those three, and then we'll come back to Ian. So Kirsty, kick us off. Just all introduce yourself in the way that Judith did, just for that little bit of context. It helps everyone else. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Kirsty. I'm a Chief Exec of Rockpool. We're a specialist training organisation and deliver our training predominantly to the public sector, voluntary and community sector all across the UK. So as of Monday, we were in shutdown and no more training to be provided, and we're planning our kind of coming back, I suppose, around September time, because we generally don't do a lot of training around July and August anyway. So that was always our quiet period. Good news is that actually in the last week we've been awarded contracts worth 250k, both coming from police and crime commissioners' offices, but fundamentally coming from the Home Office. And we've been having a debate within the business about whether we should be asking for some upfront money from them. The contract won't be starting until September because of it being training. And I think the other thing that I've just been mindful of is that both of these customers are brand new customers to us. We don't have a relationship with them. We've never delivered training for them previously. I know we come highly recommended, and hence why we've got the contracts and stuff. So I suppose my question is about how do you just go and have an honest conversation? I mean, we've got enough in the reserves to last for 6 months. You know, we feel quite comfortable within that, but I suppose what I'm mindful of is not looking like that we're desperate and we're going to fall over if they don't give us any money up front either.
Kirsty, that's a great question. We'll log that and we'll come back to Ian after this trio of questions just now. But thank you, that was a really brilliant one. And we've got Jen Fox and then Rebecca. Jen, if you could just introduce yourself likewise, and then we'll do that. So yeah, just if you can switch on your visual, that'd be great.
Can you hear me as well?
I can hear you perfectly. I'm just looking for you on video, but I can't see you yet. But
but
fire away, Jen.
Great. Hello. Good morning. I am a director in Action Tutoring, a medium-sized charity operating across England at present. So, context, we've 30 people strong staff team, working with about 2,000 volunteers and about 100 schools. So our partnership is with schools, and our beneficiaries are disadvantaged young people. We are thankfully in an okay position financially for 6 months, with prudent reserves being stocked away. Thank you to the board for pushing on that for so many years. So my question is more about the commercial side and strategic changes. We've come under pressure from all sides really quickly to adapt and to ramp up some of our changes to delivery. So specifically for us, looking at online tutoring as opposed to in-person tutoring. It was in our plan to phase this in and to pilot next year. None of the planning has been done. I guess my question is how or what things should we be considering when we're thinking of ramping up the kind of speed at which we try and get delivery in this model out? Is it a good opportunity to test something in a new environment, or is it reputational risk if we do it quickly and do it badly?
Right, so a great question really there about do we use this opportunity to accelerate a change in our business model that we're thinking about anyway, but do we use this moment now? So thank you for that, Jen, and welcome to the call. And I know you're here instead of Susanna, so that's great. And Ian will come back to that in a second. And then the third of the trio of questions is from Rebecca, who's in a lovely pink polo neck, which I'm admiring very much, and brightening up my morning. Rebecca, just if you could just introduce yourself and fire away, that'd be lovely, and I'll shut up.
Morning, folks. I think you'll find it's salmon, actually. But
really? Okay. It's my
So I'm Rebecca. I'm from social enterprise Your Own Place in Norfolk. We're a community interest company. Ours is sort of quite an unusual model, I think, compared to quite a lot in social club. We sell B2B, so businesses are our customers. We have a small number of small local authority commissions. We have tiny bits of donations and some legacy kind of charitable funding too. Obviously, the first sort of things I did were get in touch with all of them, and they're all either sort of not very responsive because they're local authorities, and I fully understand we're very low priority. We're in a very good financial position because we recently took on social investment. Our social investor equally is incredibly understanding. Further repayment holidays, that's all well and good. We exist to prevent homelessness, so 100% of our work has just stopped overnight because we work face to face. We've gone into listening mode because we want to listen to our community, whether that's young people, people struggling in poverty, in isolation, young carers, our volunteers, our mentees, etc., etc. So we're kind of finding ways to listen and collate that information, both in terms of our own local response, but also to feed that in strategically to what the Norfolk Resilience Forum is doing to respond to the community. So we're not short of ideas about how we could help. I suppose what I'm taking to my board virtually on Monday evening is, what is the sense in paying a team for 6 months and using up our reserves when those lovely commissioners are saying, we'll postpone your delivery? Well, that's great, but I'm spending the money you gave me now to pay them. And then when I'm delivering in September, when that money's run out, I can't bring in new commissions because A, we don't know what the landscape looks like, and B, we can't take any more work on because we're still delivering the old ones for which the money's run out. So whilst, yes, great, you know, we've got cash in the bank, what sense does it make to witter that away and be left with a social investment loan we can't repay at the end of it because of the unbelievable unknown unknowns? So, you know, it's not that we're not doing, it's not that we're not working with our supply chains and our partners and doing lots of asking and coming up with ideas, but there's just this existential looming question of the moral right I have to spend £80,000 on payroll in the next 6 months, with a view to then closing.
That's a really brilliant question, and because it's you're being very proactive, which is amazing. But there is this kind of I think this moral question. I think you as you put it to around how do you deal with the fact that there is no work to do, but there's a payroll, and then when there is work to do, you may find yourself. You may find your coffers have been significantly depleted. So that's a brilliant question. Turning back to Iain, there's three. If you could tackle those in sequence, that'd be fantastic. And then we'll be coming up to the hour, I think, by then. But Iain, over to yourself. Thanks, guys. Those are all brilliant questions. Iain.
Yeah, sorry, I was just making sure my microphone worked. I'll take those in turn, Craig, and thank you for all the easy questions this morning there.
Yeah,
always good to do easy webinars. Let me take Kirsty's question first. I think, Kirsty, that your question fits with one of the points that I was making, that, and perhaps I will emphasize it again, that there's a massive edict from the heart of government that anyone who's got public sector cash and is using it to buy things should be kind, considerate, flexible, innovative with how they're using that money to buy things with. So the answer to your question from me is yes, go and ask the question. Go and ask for some flexibility, but show them your financial bona fides at the same time. It won't be a massive concern to anyone in government who wants to be helpful if they can see really clearly that you're financially sound. So go and ask the question, and most of the time you'll find the answer is yes. And if you need some of that money up front to do the preparatory work and keep some people on your books who may be flight risks, Go and talk to them. Why would they say no in this current situation? They want you there in September or whenever it turns out to be, ready to deliver. So I can only encourage you to go and ask, go and have the conversation, and you don't need anything other than yourself and your brain really to go and have the conversation.
So be proactive, Kirsty, is the message there, yeah? Yeah, thank you.
This is probably worth me saying, Craig, and I may have voiced it slightly when I did my initial burst, but this climate of helpfulness from government in the use of public funds in the way that I've described is going to be temporary. This isn't something that's going to last for a long time. So although we shouldn't hoard, because we're told not to hoard, go and hoard. Go and take advantage of these opportunities now before the shelves are empty. There's about 12 mixed metaphors there. Let me move on to Jen's question, which is about, do you move to your newer business models quicker than you might ordinarily have done? Do you use this as an opportunity? That's what I understood your question to be, Jen.
Not.
Good. Yes, I can see that. I can see that. I'm hesitating to say anything about what people are wearing, Craig, because I can see that's dangerous on this call. But I don't want to try and give you a very smart answer to say it's binary, yes or no. One thing to think about, though, is the opportunity cost of not doing it and the risk of not doing it. So one thing that will happen after this calms down is a lot of people who did things physically will realize that they don't need to, and they will understand. It will have been a big shock to their system, a big shock rather to their system. They will understand better than they did before that you can do so much more online. And in many ways, the social business sector is quite a lot behind other parts of industry on this, for good reasons, because social businesses tend to be very peripatetic in the way that they operate, for really good reasons. So Jen, I would say to you, think about what happens if you don't. So, you know, if you land in September, normality of a kind comes back, and then you go back to plan A, which is slowly to move to a new model. Where will you be in relation to your competitors then, after lots of people have understood that online and virtual is a fast growing phenomenon? Because people won't go back. They'll realize that you don't have to travel around the country to do various things. You don't have to meet. Lots of people will switch to virtual board meetings as a norm, for example. Lots of people will stick their finance team at home. Most of those people don't need to be in an office. Why would you put them in an office? They're just occupying space and growing your overhead, and so on and so forth. So think about the opportunity cost, if that helps at all.
Go for it. Yeah. You
can come back on this if you want to. Shall I go to the third one, which is Rebecca's question about this moral right? Do you want me to move on to that one?
Yeah, let's do that.
Excuse me. I'm not sure it's a... Rebecca, I understood what you said, and you put it really powerfully and really clearly. I wouldn't necessarily see it as a moral issue, although I know why you said it. I just see it as a matter of financial survival. You know, you probably don't have the financial right to use cash that isn't being deployed to provide something you're being paid for. So I would just see it as a kind of existential financial issue. And I can hear a dog somewhere in the background.
Sorry, so that's me. Just a second, I'm going to mute my phone.
It's not very often what I say annoys dogs, but anyway. So I think you're in a very difficult position to even think about doing what you've said is a possibility, which is, you know, using cash you've got now simply to keep people around. And I know this sounds slightly melodramatic, but it is going to be better for people if they can find a way of mothballing operations, if they can retain their best people, and then bring them back when things heat back up again. It's difficult to argue against that as a model, to be honest, given obviously I only have limited information about what you said, but that would be my initial reaction.
Any sort of responses to some of this? Because I think some of the advice will obviously will be well received. Others of it you might think, well, actually, I'm not sure. What are your three of you? What are your sort of reflections on what you're hearing from Iain? Where does that leave you? Rebecca, any?
I've been muted. I'm unmuted. Hello. Thanks, Iain. I think it's really hard. I mean, I think, you know, recruitment is already incredibly hard in Norfolk. The nature of what we do means induction is incredibly hard and lengthy and therefore expensive. And I probably wouldn't hesitate to say we will lose our best people if we halt proceedings, they take unpaid leave, whatever options it is we look at, you know, that to start from scratch in 6 months' time, given how hard it's been to get where we are in 6 years, looks, you know, unlikely at this juncture, I would say. So I suppose I'm reluctant to do that. I think I'm more keen to do something that those that are paying us are happy for us to do, and get their agreement that what we're doing is a good second best. But I think just sort of two things on that. One is, Jen, just to call out to you if you're still there, we're also exploring all the tech options. We've done a digital project with Carnegie UK recently, so we're looking at, as we have been for a while, like you, taking all of our content online anyway. But to come back on what you said, Iain, we work with the voiceless in our communities, and there's a reason for face-to-face, because many people, and not just young people, are digitally excluded. 750,000 of them are estimated, a lack of confidence, skills, resilience, software, hardware, and access. And so sometimes there is no substitute for face-to-face. So we have to be really pragmatic and honest that that's why face-to-face services are required. So it's going to be some tough decisions, I think, against that backdrop.
Yeah. Thank you, Rebecca. But did Kirsty or Jen have any additional reflections back, or should we open the floor for anyone else to? We've got time for at least a couple more questions, I think, and from the group. Any more from the two of you? No. Okay, great. I'm just looking around the virtual room, and this is brilliant tech, isn't it? It's, you can do these so much here. This is, I think, Social Club Online is something that we will probably keep once this is all over. Those of you that are, I'm just looking around here. There's quite a few social care businesses on the call, and in terms of the financial dimensions for yourselves, most of your money is coming straight from local authority. How are you finding this? I know that financially there are some of you rely on direct payments and those kind of non-block types of funding. How are things looking in terms of the way local government is actually responding to this in real time with you? And any thoughts on that from any of you who are local government dependent, and any advice to others?
Karen's raised her hand. Karen, would you like to come in?
Karen Jackson, yeah. Do you want to introduce yourself, Karen, as well? That'd be great.
Hang on, Hi, I'm Karen Jackson. I'm trying to put the video on, but it won't let me.
Don't worry, just talk. It's fine.
So we are a community interest organisation providing community adults and children's services across Kirklees. So we have contracts with both the NHS, and the local authorities. I think this is not going to help some of you, and I'm sorry about this, but I think our challenge is going to be responding to the additional demand. And there was some guidance issued for us yesterday around supporting discharge from hospital that has to be now done within an hour. For those people who are well enough to go home, no questions asked. So there's not going to be a debate about can I go to this home or that home or the other. There's going to be discharge.
Yeah.
What's interesting for me and might be helpful for you all to see, and I'll try and work the technology and share the guidance with you. Within that guidance, there is absolute clarity that whatever we need to do will be financially covered within reason. You know, we're not all flying off to Barbados or whatever, but within reason, they will cover that. And in there is a section about third sector and other more community-based services that can join in with this. So I think there's a real opportunity, team, to think about how you join in with your local NHS community provider and support them in providing, and also try to find a different source of funding through this. Now, I'm not saying that's going to be the new panacea, but I do think there's an opportunity.
Yeah,
that helps.
That's really helpful. So in your area, your organisation is effectively the local NHS provider.
Yeah.
Your advice to anybody who's got those kind of relationships is that by joining in with those kind of providers as a smaller organisation, that may be a route to getting resource, because unlimited resource is being effectively put through the NHS into this. And
we know, I mean, I suppose I work in quite a unique community in West Yorkshire. We know we all need each other, so we are already talking with our third sector partners about, right, okay, what does this mean in terms of what you can provide and support. And also as a social enterprise, we are looking about how we, taking Iain's advice, how we support from our reserves in terms of some of our local community organisations who are doing great stuff that we absolutely depend on. Otherwise, we're just going to get overwhelmed. So we're spending a lot of time and effort trying to work out what that is and supporting both financially, but also in terms of space and back office and swabbing and all sorts of stuff.
So you, in a way, but by doing that, you're also helping the upstream effort a bit, because the more that those type of organisations are actually doing, the more it's stemming and fencing upstream.
And I think it relates to Rebecca's point, which was we also need them when all this is calmer. We're going to need each other then as well. And what we can't afford to do is lose things from our system that actually then make it harder work when we get to the other end. So we're desperately trying to support and maintain all the things that we all depend on, because it's counterproductive to do anything other.
That's a fantastic set of points, Karen. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we've got about seven or 8 minutes left. The way I want to kind of organise the last bits are in the social club way. We'll go back to Iain in a second, and I'll ask Iain to kind of almost summarise a bit about what he's heard and what his final words of advice are, based on what he's heard, and also just a reminder perhaps of the key takeaways that he wants us to go away with. And then what I want to do then is just make a couple of club announcements, and then I'm going to hand over to Joe at the end just to remind you of when the next webinars are and what times they are and what they're about, because they're not front of mind for me at this second. So first of all, Iain, could you just perhaps offer a few moments of reflections on what you've heard and reminders of your key takeaways? That'd be fantastic. Iain?
I'm happy to do that, Craig, and it's always much more instructive to hear people's experiences than it is to opine. So thank you to everyone who's shared where they are now and some of the very good things that they're doing. Without wanting to repeat very much of what I said before, I guess a couple of takeaways, and Karen's intervention a moment ago was was particularly instructive, because there's an example of a very proactive organisation and board already doing some of the things that I was talking about, and also taking advantage of some of the open door policy of government at the moment in terms of cash and mobilising resource. A couple of things I will sign off on. I do want to repeat, and it's very boring for some people to hear this, but I'm going to keep repeating it. Make sure somebody understands the hour-by-hour cash position of the business. So many people just lose track of this, and good businesses go out of business because they misunderstood cash. And this is a very, very difficult position to predict cash flow and predict cash positions, but it's so critical. And the other thing, I guess, a kind of theme of the conversation, Craig, that's emerged this morning is ask. You know, ask for funding, ask for flexibility from funders, ask partners and colleagues and acquaintances who you might not ordinarily ask, what can they do to help you? What can you do to help them? Put to one side some of the independence of operation that sometimes pervades what we all do. And I think asking, being non-British really, and asking is probably a theme here. Other than that, I don't want to occupy the rest of the call by repeating some of the tips and advice that I opened the webinar with.
Thank you, Ian, and I think it's been yours has been an extremely valuable set of points and contributions. So thank you. I've got a couple of in the couple of minutes we've got left. Just wanted to say one or two things from here. Obviously, Social Club is going to be online for the foreseeable future. All of our normal events will be online, so all the dates you had in your diary before all this will be happening. We will probably experience some changes in speakers and that sort of thing, depending on whether we can get people participating in this way. But all your normal clubs are going to happen as usual. We're going to continue to be having these special clubs online as we go forward. The topics of them will depend largely on what we're hearing from you, and we're getting ideas and requests all the time. Keep them coming. We will respond, and we will make things available. Expect probably at least one or two events like this a week. Joe will continue to publicise them and put them out, and we will ensure that the content is relevant to you at this time. Second point from me, I've said it on a couple of emails as well. We have a fantastic group of associates volunteering here who basically, if any of you are in need of some external support and advice at this time, we've got a number of associates that have basically stepped forward and are willing to help you in your hour of need, whatever that is. If you need that kind of help at this time, get in touch. Let us know, and we will be here for you during this time. And we'll just you know what to do. Just make contact. That's all from me. Joe, very quickly, if you could just remind people of next week's events as we know them to be at the moment.
Okay, so the next support webinar will be on Tuesday the 24th. That's 10 until 11 o'clock. The topic of that is leading in a crisis. How do I help myself and my senior colleagues cope and prepare the organisation for what's to come? Craig's going to be leading that session. And then the next day, on Wednesday the 25th, from 2 till 3, we have Liam Carhill from Sector 3 Digital. He's going to be running the webinar on how to lead a team you can't see. So running remote teams and virtual meetings. And then a week today, on Friday the 27th, 10 till 11, and then repeating weekly, we're going to have our weekly download. So this is an opportunity for members to share, learn and support one another. Just to let you know that we had our first webinar yesterday. That will be uploaded to YouTube straight after this call. So share that and check out the YouTube. I'll put all the information on the WhatsApp group. If you aren't on the WhatsApp group, drop me an email and I'll send you a link to join it. And also keep checking the website, as all of this information will be, all of the webinars will be updated on there as they are confirmed. So any other questions, drop me an email.
Joe, thank you very much for arranging today's session. Very capably done. And thank you all for attending. I hope you have a great day and try and have a good weekend, and we'll see you all very soon. Thank you all, and we're gonna finish there. Thank you very much, everybody.
Take
Bye
care
for now.
of yourselves. Bye.